primary day to all who celebrate. It is Tuesday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. And this meeting of the Board of Elections will come to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Johnson,
Present.
Vice Chairman Peaceable,
Present.
Member,
It's okay.
Member Bettenker,
Here.
Member Connors,
Present.
Member Maderas. Here. Member Scholes.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The first item on the agenda, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting of March 5th, 2024. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I abstain, please.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I abstain.
I think, wait a minute, was I there? I think I missed that meeting as well, so I will abstain as well, but the minutes have been approved. Item number 2, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting of March 19th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain again.
Okay, thank you, Diane. And the ayes have it. Agenda item number 3, the board may discuss and vote to approve the calendar for the Cranston special referendum to be held on Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. Executive Director?
Good afternoon, members of the board. Tomorrow, on April 3rd, the Cranston Board of Canvass is expected to certify to the Secretary of State a bond question to be voted on and a Title 17 special referendum to be held on June 4th, 2024. The staff worked with the Cranston Board of Canvassers on the draft calendar presented to you today. The bond question to be presented to voters on June 4th is for issuance of $40 million in bonds and notes for the purchase and/or acquisition of land and building, construction, renovation, improvement, alteration, repair, landscaping, furnishing, and/or equipping of schools and school facilities throughout the city of Cranston. Just to give you an update on why we're requesting that the board approve this calendar prior to it being certified to the Secretary of State's office. House Bill 7278, authorizing the special referendum, passed the House on March 19th and is actually on the Senate calendar tonight for passage and concurrence. The companion bill, Senate Bill 2246, passed the Senate on March 28th and is on the House calendar tonight for passage and concurrence. Although these bills are expected to pass tonight, the staff is requesting that the board approve this calendar subject to passage of said legislation authorizing this special referendum, and also subject to certification by the local board tomorrow to the Secretary of State, which they expect to happen at their meeting already scheduled for tomorrow. The board has already approved, if you remember this special the polling places for this special referendum. That was done at a meeting on February 6th, with the same stipulation that it be subject to passage by the General Assembly. If the board doesn't have any other questions regarding this draft calendar, the staff requests that it be approved for the special election, a referendum election scheduled to be held in the city of Cranston on June 4th.
Thank you, Miguel. Does anyone have any questions for Miguel?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve this subject to the passage by General Assembly and subject to the Secretary of State's approval.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Agenda item number 4, the board may discuss and vote to approve the calendar for the Charahoe special referendum to be held on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024.
You'll notice a trend here. There are many school bond referendums going on. So the Charahoe Regional School District is comprised of the towns of Charlestown, Richmond, and the town of Hopkinton. On March 28th, the Richmond Board of Canvassers certified to the Secretary of State a bond question to be voted on in a Title 17 special referendum to be held on May 7th, 2024, for the Charahoe Regional School District. On March 29th, the day after, the Charlestown Board of Canvassers and the Hopkinton Board of Canvassers met to certify the question to the Secretary of State. The staff worked with all of these local boards on the draft calendar that you have before you today. The ballot question to be presented to voters on May 7th is for the issuance of $150 million in bonds and notes for the constructing, furnishing, and equipping of 3 elementary schools, 1 in each of the communities. House Bill 8001 and Senate Bill 2550, authorizing this special referendum, passed the General Assembly on March 21st and was effective without the governor's signature on March 29th. I'll also note that cities and towns typically have 50 days to certify their questions to the Secretary of State's office, which was the case in the Cranston special referendum that I just covered with you today. However, in this particular case, the General Assembly, with the special legislation, reduced that time frame to 30 days before the election day. And the General Assembly did reach out to me to ask if that time frame was okay with the staff with preparation of the equipment and the testing for the early voting period. And we did not have any issue with preparing for that special referendum with the 30-day time frame. If the board doesn't have any questions regarding this draft calendar, the staff requests that the calendar be approved for the special referendum to be held in the towns of Charlestown, Richmond, and Hopkinton on May 7th, 2024.
Thanks, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel? Hearing none, does a board member wish to make a motion?
I just have one question.
Go for it.
For council. Ray, any issues that you see with respect to the change in the dates for certification?
No, I don't. So long as it can be done practically, we have the General Assembly involved, so I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you. I'll move to approve it, Madam Chair, the calendar.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Agenda item number 5, the board may discuss and vote on the polling locations for the Charahoe special referendum to be held on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024.
On March 28th, the Richmond and Hopkinton Board of Canvassers met to discuss selecting the polling locations for their May 7, 2024 special referendum, which you just approved the calendar for the Charahoe Regional School District special referendum. On March 29th, the Richmond Board of Canvassers met to approve their locations. The Board of Elections staff received the request the same day that the local boards voted to request their polling place locations for the special referendum. The town of Charlestown is comprised of 4 precincts and has a total of 7,185 registered voters, while Richmond is comprised of 3 precincts with 6,748 registered voters. Hopkinton is comprised of 3 precincts with 6,858 registered voters. All 3 boards of canvassers voted to open a single location in their town halls. In their request, all 3 communities cited the following reasons for choosing their town halls as their location on May 7th. First, they want to avoid voter confusion because their annual financial town referendum for the Charahoe School District is traditionally held at the town hall every year. And it will also be held this year for the Charahoe for the financial town referendum for the school district. 2, schools will be in session that day, making them a much less viable option to be used as for hosting a polling place on May 7th. 3, the town hall is in a centralized location for the voters in the town to access voting. 4, the Board of Canvassers staff is going to be on hand right there at the town hall to assist the poll workers if any issues arise during election day. It also will reduce the financial burden on the town in opening and staffing those additional locations. on that day, and each facility can handle the expected volume of turnout, which is expected to be under 20% for the day, half of which, as you know, is expected to be cast by mail or during the 20-day early voting period, since this is a Title 17, a special election. Now, the Board of Canvassers, as you know, is required to post an ad in the newspaper regarding the combination of polls, and also to post a notice at any location not opened on May 7th. In fact, we do have specialized signage that we do provide to the local boards that they can post at those locations that are closed, and they can actually write the location where that voter is voting on that day on that sign. Those are very popular. The Board of Canvassers, of course, is going to be increasing staff at this location and making the appropriate arrangements to make sure that parking is handled efficiently and entry and exit from the building is accessible and handled efficiently as well. We, of course, will provide each community with additional equipment, meaning additional electronic poll books, additional DS200s, and voting booths as needed to handle the turnout, which is expected to be relatively low. The staff here at the Board of Elections have reviewed their request, and based on the centralized location of these combined precincts, we agree with these selections, and we ask you to approve them.
Thanks, Miguel. Any questions
I have a
for
question,
Miguel?
Madam Chair. Do you know if they post notices on their town website as well, if they do have such a website?
We do encourage them to post notices on their website, not only for Election Day, but also for early voting, to provide the dates for when early voting will be available for any Title 17.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, does someone wish to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the polling places for the Charahoe special referendum.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Agenda item number 6, the board may discuss and vote to review public comment for the rule and regulations 410-RICR-10-00-10, campaign finance accounts receivable, reduction of penalties and suspension of campaign finance account, and to adopt said regulation. And I see we have Mr. Thornton. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, I summarized this proposed regulation just back in February, but just briefly. If adopted, this rule and regulation provides guidance on the reduction of penalties and suspension of campaign finance accounts to be applied to filers who meet certain terms and conditions, subject to express approval and determination by the board. This rule and regulation is necessary to address large and disproportionate fines that have been assessed to candidates. The fines have been assessed consistent with statutory provisions that have been in place since 2002. The disproportionality of the fines is contrary to protections provided to individuals under the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution against excessive fines. There are 4 conditions that are required for the reduction of penalties and suspension of accounts. Again, I summarized those at the last meeting. It essentially would apply to campaigns that have stopped communicating with the board under various circumstances, one being that they did not file the declaration of candidacy or did not qualify for placement on a ballot, and then did not file any reports for the campaign finance division. The second being that the candidate did register with the Board of Elections as a candidate, filed a declaration of candidacy, qualified for placement on the ballot, but failed to file one or more campaign finance reports during the election cycle. The candidate declared their candidacy and remains active for the board. The third condition is that the filer has registered as a candidate for corporate office for the board, filed a declaration of candidacy, and qualified for placement on the ballot, and also filed all campaign finance reports during the election cycle in which they were candidate, but failed to provide a final accounting to reside in their campaign account. And the fourth criteria would be, is if the filer registered as a candidate for public office, file a declaration of candidacy, qualify for placement on the ballot, and also file all campaign finance reports due in an election cycle, including a final accounting and dissolution of their campaign account. Those seem to be the 4 general criteria under which most candidates would fall, that end up in arrears for the board. The ability to assess fines and fees for delinquent campaign finance reports began in 2002. Campaign finance has overseen the reporting compliance of thousands of candidates since that period of time. There's a small universe of about 30 candidates out of the thousands whose fines have become disproportionate because of the mechanism under which fines and fees are assessed pursuant to the statute. Adopting this regulation would allow us to reduce those fines to a proportionate level, making collection much more feasible and possible with the assistance perhaps of the state's Department of Revenue Central Collections Unit. I would anticipate the need to use this regulation would be limited once we cure that universe, in that our proactive efforts and reactive efforts for collection have improved greatly since this legacy debt has been established, including use of the Central Collections Unit, issuance of subpoenas, doing compliance and so forth. And again, on the proactive end, reaching out, doing more education on the front end as candidates are declaring for public office. So I would ask you to possibly adopt this regulation.
Thank you, Rick, and I know there's a lot there. This has been in development for some time, but I'm sure there are probably additional questions that folks have. Let's just start. I don't know.
Rick, I have one question. There are a number of candidates, or former candidates, who racked up fines in tens of thousands of dollars. So how would this regulation affect those individuals?
That's essentially the universe that this regulation is targeting.
Yep.
Depending on whether the candidate remains open with the board, whether they have just debt but no owing reports, we will look at their campaign to see when they stopped filing, the last time they filed with the board, the maximum $1,000 fine per report through the second election cycle next following when they ran for office. That's what the fines will be reduced to. They will have an opportunity to appeal the fines before the board. And again, all these cases will come before the board with the numbers, and the board will have an opportunity to validate those numbers as well.
So these regulations will go a long way to clean up the arrearages that you've been working on diligently for the last few years. Right. Okay. I know you worked on it a long time and you've given a lot of thought to this and coming up with a 4 scenario. So I think you've addressed most of the issues that we have been working on for the last 6 or 7 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Commissioner
I
Bettencourt.
just wanted to ask a question based on Commissioner Scholl's question. So if this applies to all, former candidates that we have, what does that timeline look like for us internally as a Board of Elections? Because that, I didn't see a timeline specifically in the regulations, which is fine, but I don't know if we would be sticking to a certain timeline.
Well, if the regulation is adopted,
Mhm.
then what campaign finance staff will do is identify those that would fit the criteria,
Okay.
Which essentially we've already done that. We will reach out and notify each of those candidates in terms of their debt,
Mhm.
and what is being proposed being reduced to. Okay, and then the cases will come before the board, obviously won't bring them all before the board in one hearing, but they'll come before the board systematically. So I would expect, over a period of time coming into an election year, we may be able to work some through, but it may take a bit of a process to get all of them addressed.
And then after you go through this first list, I think going later on, it would be probably on an annual basis.
In fact, as I anticipate, I think once this list is cleared off,
Mhm.
I really would not expect
Got it.
any campaign to get to that point. There'll be a few outliers, but not nearly as extent.
Thank you.
It's really to address everything in your rearview mirror. And the question was whether how can you do so in a uniform way so that it's consistent, transparent, and this, I think, this was Rick's way of doing it. I think he has good formulas in there so that all of these delinquent filers can be finally addressed and put to bed.
Thank you.
Oh, it is.
Who?
It is.
Oh, it's green.
Do you want to talk closer?
Can you try the other one? I don't know. That's right. Thanks, John.
Thank you for keeping us in mind.
I don't have to repeat it.
That
sounds better, huh?
Yeah, that sounds better. Anything else?
So the only thing I would just add is that you'll see these few red lines in here. This is from the last time this came before you. There was some discussion. So I think you just have to make note of that in your motion that you're adopting the modifications that I can't recall. I don't believe they were specifically voted on last time. So I think we should do so now, unless Rick, you
I believe they were, but.
think each of these had a vote? Okay.
Yes, I do.
All right. So then if they've all been adopted with a vote, then it's just a plain motion.
Yes, sir.
I just have one question. Ray, when will the regulations take effect?
I believe, and Patty's here, but this has been posted for quite some time on the Secretary's website, right?
Went through the public hearing, and these comments just have to be added to the one that was posted.
And is this under that new designation you discovered of non-APA filing?
This is in that APA.
Yeah, so it could be, as soon as you take your vote, it's effective.
Great, thanks.
Like, it's 20 days out. Once they put it on, it's 20 days out. It takes effect.
Well, I mean, technically, since we're not part of the APA, it could be effective immediately, but if you wanted to make it subject to the Secretary's normal 20-day period after it's been posted, that's fine too.
Any last thoughts?
I would just ask if if you have any issue with the 20 days, if we're not subject to the APA, then in this matter, if that 20 days impacts you, if not,
No, the
There's no
20
issue
days
with that.
would not impact.
And I know we've heard and probably reviewed public comments in the past, but Ray, if appropriate, if anyone in the public wishes to comment
There's no
further.
Yeah, there's no restriction on that.
Okay.
It's not on your agenda, but, we have a long history of allowing the public to comment.
Okay, thank you. Anyone in the public? No, John's good. All right. Do we have a motion?
So I make a motion to approve the rules and regulations.
I'll second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes to adopt the regulation. Congrats, Rick.
Now the work begins.
We go. Agenda item number 7, the board may hear and consider any election matter that requires an immediate ruling or determination arising from the presidential preference primary pursuant to Title 17 of the Rhode Island General Laws.
members of the board, I'll say that I have no issues to report to the board that would require an immediate ruling or determination, but I want to give you a summary of Election Day. as it stands just prior to this meeting commencing. So as of 1:15 this afternoon, approximately 22,461 Rhode Islanders of the 794,000 registered voters in the state have voted in the presidential preference primary, for an approximate turnout of just under 4%. 5,589 voters voted during the early voting period, which was 20 days long, and ended at 4 p.m. yesterday. 10,285 have voted at the polls thus far. Polls do close at 8 p.m. We have received 6,587 of the 9,030 mail ballots requested by voters. We expect all those ballots to have been certified and tabulated by our peers this afternoon, and we expect to complete processing of mail ballots into our high-speed tabulators by the close of the polls at 8 p.m. tonight, at which time results from mail ballots will be posted probably about an hour to 2 hours after the polls close. The Board of Elections has 58 technicians in the field deployed to support the 180 polling locations in operation across the state today. That includes 252 DS200 voting machines that are out in the field, 180 express votes, and just over 700 electronic poll books. At the Lawn Avenue, I just want to make the board aware of an issue that occurred this morning at the Lawn Avenue School in Jamestown. Just prior to the opening of the polls, the poll workers being diligent in checking their supplies as they are trained to, they discovered that some CD2 ballots were included in their supplies. Jamestown is in CD1. The issue was identified quickly. Backup ballots that we had as a contingency at the town hall for CD1 were quickly brought to the polls at the opening time. And our staff, which was 7 a.m., and our staff delivered a full supply of ballots to that location by 7:25 a.m., and voting was not disrupted at that site. In terms of the rest of the state, the opening of the polls, one of the 252 DS200s that I just mentioned was replaced at the Scottish Rite Masonic Lodge in Cranston due to having an issue not allowing ballots to smoothly drop down into the ballot box and jamming. This polling place did have another DS200 operational, and it's fully functional, and there was no disruption in voting at that location. Voting was not impacted. We also did have 2 express votes of the 180 units in West Warwick that were replaced. One was damaged in delivery, and one had a technical issue. Both were replaced. Our phone center here in our building is being staffed by rotating staff of personnel. This includes 3 full-time staff members. We have 2 representatives from Election Systems and Software present on the phones to provide support, as well as 2 representatives from LHS, our poll pad support vendor. As of this meeting, we've only received less than a dozen support calls, which were quickly resolved. These typically include, not being able to enter the password. Our password is fairly complex. In fact, I've been told that it's very complex for security reasons. Some poll workers have a problem entering that into the DS200. And we also may have calls where the machine is beeping. If the machine is beeping, that's because it's plugged into an outlet that is not functional, and it has a battery backup that allows it to function for 2 hours. But while it's functioning on battery backup, it will beep consistently to warn the poll workers that it's not receiving external power. And if they hear that, if they don't know what that beep means for whatever reason, they'll call the support lines, and then we'll let them know you need to find an extension cord for a working outlet. So those are the typical problems that we would get in the morning to our call center. We expect to begin receiving results from the polling place just after the polls close at 8 p.m. We will receive polling place results and early voting results from our early voting sites about 15 minutes after the polls close. They'll be posted to our website. We expect to post, as I said, mail ballots this evening by about 10 p.m., which is typically the norm. But if we are able to, we will post them sooner than that. Other than that, as I said, I have no issues at this time to report to the board that would require an immediate ruling or determination. This concludes my Election Day report on the presidential preference primary.
Thank you, Miguel. I have a quick question, not sure if others do, but just under 4% at this point, do you remember or know what the total percentage was in 2020? Was it 20, the last PPP?
So in 2016, it was 25%,
Oh, wow.
and in 2020, it was 16%.
Interesting. And I mean, we still have between 3 and 8, but would you consider that's,
Very low.
yeah.
The weather probably isn't helping. And during 2020, the board moved the primary to June. And
Yep.
at that point, June was, the contest was, pretty much
Yep.
resolved by that late in the year. So that would have led to a lower turnout. And obviously 2016 was a record year for the entire year across the board for
Yeah.
elections. So
Yeah.
that was a very high turnout.
Very interesting. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Just a question with regard to Jamestown. So you said there were no disruption of the election, so the poll did open at 7 o'clock. It wasn't
Yes.
held for any reason.
No, we brought the town brought them some ballots that they had at the town hall as a contingency, and they were able to use those until we brought them a full supply that they would need for the entire day.
Thank you.
Okay, as I don't think we need a motion or a vote, thank you for that, Miguel, and you will keep us closely posted as the afternoon goes on.
I will.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 8, the board may discuss and vote to select the contest for the presidential preference primary election, which is subject to a risk limiting audit, RLA, pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 17-19-37.4.
So as the board knows, Rhode Island General Law 17-19-37.4 requires the Board of Elections to conduct a risk-limiting audit after each presidential preference primary and general election. The planning of this audit begins well before Election Day, as every ballot cast at either the polls during early voting or by mail must be properly batched and sealed by poll workers, local boards of canvassers, and our staff. Conducting the audit requires a mix of our full-time employees, seasonal staff, board members and staff from our Board of Canvassers, and the staff has also reached out to the political parties to make them aware of the audit, requesting they provide any individuals that they have available to assist with conducting the audit. The staff continues to closely work with an organization called Verified Voting on developing the technical aspects of this audit. One of the first formal steps that this board must take to conduct the audit is to select the contest. The staff uses several factors to determine which contest to recommend be audited, such as, for example, a high level of interest in the contest, expected closeness of the contest, and the feasibility of completing the audit before any statutory deadlines. With this in mind, the staff recommends that the board conduct an audit of the Republican presidential candidate contest. Due to the more competitive factors involved in that contest this year, and given the higher level of interest as compared to the Democrat presidential candidate contest, the risk limit for this audit would be 9%, which is the limit set typically for these risk limiting audits in the state. As part of this audit, a random sample selected will consist of random batches of ballots from across the state to be manually tallied by teams. A batch would include a single DS200 within a polling place, for example, a DS200 at an early voting location, or a batch of ballots tabulated on a high-speed tabulator here in our facility. The results will be entered into our audit software, and if necessary, additional rounds of the audit will be completed if the first round does not sufficiently satisfy the risk limit for the audit. The staff tentatively plans to conduct the dice roll to generate the random seed for selection of these batches on March 9th here in this building. The audit will be conducted on March 10th and March 11th, April's. Thank you, Patty. The audit will be, the random seed will be generated with a dice roll on April 10th, April 9th here in this building, and the actual audit will be conducted on April 10th and April 11th if additional rounds are needed. The board and the public are welcome to attend and participate in both of these events. This concludes my report on the RLA contest selection, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thanks, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel at this time?
Just a
No?
quick
Yes.
question. April 10th, what time are you going to start?
8:30 a.m.
8:30. Thank you.
I highly recommend rolling the dice. It's a lot of fun. Okay, if there are no other questions, does someone wish to make a motion?
I mean, I'll move to approve the contest for the risk limiting audit that we use the Republican primary as the contest.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Agenda item number 9, the board may discuss and vote on a request from the Warwick City Council to enhance election fairness and security, including transparency and the certification of election ballots as set forth in the attached March 20th, 2004 Warwick City Council resolution. Kathy? Oh, okay. Well, welcome. Miguel, you going to take this one to
I will,
start?
yes.
Okay.
On March 18th, 2024, the Warwick City Council passed a resolution, Resolution R-2426, requesting that the Board of Elections review methods to enhance election fairness and security, including transparency in the certification of election ballots. This resolution, as you know, is a result of an issue which occurred in Warwick during the 2022 election cycle and for which the board held several meetings towards the end of 22 regarding. A former clerk for the Warwick Board of Canvassers at that time certified a candidate for local office to the Secretary of State for ballot placement due to that candidate not having any signatures have been collected and valid signatures having been collected to be placed on the ballot. Shortly, as a result of that board meeting, the Warwick Board of Canvassers created a policy in order to prevent this issue from happening again. And that policy would involve the clerk and members of the Board of Canvassers in a second round of proofing to ensure that all candidates certified to the Secretary of State's office actually receive the correct number of signatures to be placed on the ballot. Shortly after that meeting on November 22nd, 2022, I did discuss with the staff from the Elections Division of the Secretary of State some possible improvements to the system that could prevent this from happening in the future. One of these suggestions included adding to the Central Voter Registration System, or the CVRS, a technical block that would essentially make it impossible for local boards to certify a candidate to the ballot if the CVRS did not actually have that required number of signatures certified by the local board within that system. Because as you know, the local boards, when they validate their signatures from those nomination papers, they do enter them into the Central Voter Registration System. So the Central Voter Registration System knows how many signatures, valid signatures, each candidate actually has. And we know by statute how many each candidate is required to collect depending on the local or state office. In January of 2024 of this year, I revisited the issue with the Office of the Secretary of State, and they are working on implementing a solution, and they are very much far along with it in the CVRS that will in fact prevent a local board of canvassers from certifying a candidate to them unless that candidate does have the required number of signatures. And that is in the testing phase at this point and nearing completion, and they do anticipate that it will be ready in time for the June declaration period for this election cycle. Now, we do believe that this implemented solution will significantly reduce this from occurring in the future. I did reach out as well to the clerk, the new clerk for the Warwick Board of Canvassers. She was not the clerk at the time that this happened. She was actually brought on last year just to make sure that she was aware of the situation. She had been made aware of it by her board members, and I wanted to make sure that she had read the policy that the board had implemented after that error had occurred, and she had. She did have it. She actually did improve upon it, she felt, in certain ways. She had come from the Westerly Board of Canvassers. So these were processes that she had already had in place when she was with the Westerly Board of Canvassers in certifying candidates to the Secretary of State's office. In addition, the Secretary of State's office does provide training to local boards when entering in candidates into the central voter registration system for ballot placement. And that is something that, in discussions with their office, that they are going to focus on to ensure that the local boards are aware that this issue did occur in the past and that this new implementation of the CVRS will be a safety measure, that they would not be able to do that again in another jurisdiction or in the city of Warwick. And Kathy's here to answer any questions that you might have on how that process would work.
Thanks, Miguel. Kathy, would you add anything in general to start, or? They're really not.
And I will
Very
mention that we
nice.
have Councilman Ed, your last name,
Producer.
Lattiser here. He spoke before the board several times in 2022
Okay.
on this matter. And he is also here. I reached out to him yesterday and let him know that this would be on the agenda.
Okay. Thanks, Miguel. Kathy?
And I guess another suggestion that we have is boards of canvassers receive these sample ballots or ballot proofs ahead of time, and maybe those could be made available for candidates or for people just and either on their website or just in their offices, so that candidates or the public have a chance to review these ballots before they're actually signed off on.
Thanks, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy or Miguel to start?
A question.
Yes, sir.
On the CVRS, the candidate running for office qualifies. Is that name flagged on the CVRS as a candidate for office?
So when you are, when you're certifying these candidates, you're able to see a list of all of the candidates. So you would have to go in one by one on the list and qualify these for the next election. So they would qualify for ballot placement for the November election. So it's actually the primary. And then in this case, you would be able to qualify a voter, or you would be able to qualify a candidate even if they didn't have the requisite number of signatures. And what we're implementing is that they wouldn't be able to move forward. They would just be grayed out and they wouldn't be able to qualify for the next ballot.
Right, but when the person qualifies in the beginning, the clerk at city or town has access to the CVRS, correct? And is that name flagged for members of the Secretary of State's office to know that person is now qualified as a candidate?
Not necessarily. What we do is that information is live on our website. So we would be able to see who has qualified. We're able to see the same information that the local boards do. So we'll be able to tell if the person does receive signatures, if they qualify based on the number of signatures or endorsement for the ballot. But we're looking at the same information.
Okay.
It's not necessarily flagged.
Right. I'm just curious because we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of names.
Oh,
So,
I know.
right. So you get say whatever it is, 700,000 names
Mhm.
on the ballots. And the name is, person qualifies. Does the administrator of the CVRS, which is Secretary of State, does it have a separate file for all those who have qualified?
Yes.
Okay, so that pops up and populates a separate list.
So we're able
Right.
to run a report for those qualified candidates.
And does the Secretary of State's office now go back and determine whether that those people have actually qualified, have the signatures?
So the towns are responsible for their local candidates. We're looking at the state candidates, making sure that they're, that they've qualified on our end, but the towns are essentially responsible for the local candidates. We do try to, look at the list, but with the number of, we do our due diligence in making sure that the right candidates are on the ballot.
So getting back to the city or town, and they've come up with a list. I'm trying to understand how they're going to determine, or at least indicate on the CVRS that the person's qualified. Is it one person that makes that decision, or is it the actual board of canvassers that goes through the list and say, these people are qualified, and you are directed to indicate that on the CVRS? Exactly how does it work?
I mean, it's more of an administrative task. So when it's up to the Board of Canvassers. So if it's for instance, I can only speak on Providence. So the way that I would qualify the candidate in Providence is I would make sure that the person had the requisite number of signatures, and then I would qualify that person for the next ballot or for the ballot placement for November. And then we would proof that against, I would run a report and I would proof it with the board members to ensure that I had the right number that the right candidates were moving on to the ballot in November. That's how I would proof it. And then just checking the declaration pages, making sure that, I had a file for every candidate with their nomination papers, and making sure that I had the endorsement with that. So each candidate had their own file, and I would run that one by one against my ballot proofs and against the CVRS and my report of the qualified candidates to ensure that every single candidate that was eligible and qualified would move on to the next ballot.
So this proposed change, how does that compare to what the procedure you just indicated?
In this change here, what happens now in the CVRS is that you're looking at a list of all of the candidates, and even those candidates that didn't receive any signatures, let's say they didn't pick up nomination papers or they just didn't turn in nomination papers, I would be able to now qualify that candidate for ballot placement, even if they did not qualify. And now with the implementation that we're doing, that name will automatically be grayed out because they didn't turn in any
So you wouldn't
signatures.
even
So they wouldn't be able to bypass that and move them on to ballot placement.
Right.
That's
There you go.
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Connors?
Follow up on that point, is that protection in place now, or are you planning on implementing that for the future?
We're in testing right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, one more question for Miguel. Other than the 2022 situation in Warwick, to your knowledge, has this ever happened before where a candidate that was certified that shouldn't have been?
That was the first instance, to my knowledge, where it had occurred. And I believe that was discussed as well at the board meeting. That's why it stood out. But despite the fact that it was rare, now that we have the central voter registration system fully in place, obviously for a very long time, we thought that would be an extra safeguard just to prevent it from happening again, even if it is rare.
Just one
Yes,
other
Commissioner
point.
Matias.
I really like the idea of having extra eyes on those proof ballots, because that will make a big difference too, just to make sure everything's okay. And I guess we owe our thanks to Warwick, even though it was an unfortunate incident. This improves our systems overall, so it's a good thing in that way, I guess you can look at it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Also, just building off that, want to express my appreciation. I mean, errors happen and mistakes happen, but I really appreciate the way that our offices work in lockstep at the state level and hand in hand with each of our 39 cities and towns, which for the concentration of this state are, that's a lot of folks. And I just continue to appreciate the way we spot these errors, make sure that we're doing all the due diligence. So thank you for that. And I know, I feel really good about these solutions, but I know, Councilman Lattiser, you sponsored this resolution. Is there anything, hearing everything you did today, any further comments you wish to make?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So, as you suspect, I'm the guy that drew the short straw in that situation. But I have to start off by saying how much I appreciated the professionalism and the due diligence that this commission took and the approach that you all took with regards to that issue. Needless to say, it was somewhat traumatic. It was rather stressful, embarrassing, et cetera. And I was really impressed with how quickly everything was brought to the surface and the approach that everyone took, as well as yourself. So the issue here is, or the goal is that this never happens again. It's the most unfortunate situation that took place, and I think it was completely because of checks and balances and the lack thereof. I really, and I completely agree with Kathy's recommendation that the local boards provide the candidates with what I'll call a sample ballot to review and sign off of. There's a lot of moving parts. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's a lot of moving parts. And needless to say, I was rather upset when I received the phone call and say, I thought you said you were unopposed. I am unopposed. Not anymore, you're not. But, you get past that and say, okay, so what do we need to do, collectively as a team to fix this? And I'm more than satisfied with what Mr. Nunes has presented with the proposals there, as well as yourself. And I think that, it's going to be quite effective. So on behalf of my colleagues on the city council and the city of Warwick, once again, thank you all for your time and for your very focused attention to this. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. I'm a lifelong resident of the great city of Warwick, so thank you for all you do.
The right ward.
Buttonwoods.
I'll leave that alone. Thank you.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
if I-
sir.
If I could, I'd just like to thank the Executive Director and the Secretary of State's office, and Kathy in particular, for addressing this. I know it's been a long time. I know you started addressing this back in '22. I know the resolution just cropped up now because of the new election cycle, but I know you guys have been working on it, and I appreciate it because I think that it was an issue for the whole board when we were here in '22 and actually heard that there was somebody on the calendar, on the ballot. And I mean, not just for the council person, but just for anybody that it could happen to. So I thank you for your diligence on this.
Yes. Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to echo the sentimental gratitude for Secretary of State's office and Executive Director. I'm told, on a follow-up to my own question, I'm told that it did actually happen 6 to 8 years ago in South Kingstown. So it is a very important change that you're taking care of. Thank you.
Get you doing research on the multitasking.
Research on the fly.
Okay, any final business before we adjourn? And we actually do have to take a vote. What would the vote be? To just on a request.
Ray, do we need a vote on that? I mean, they've already implemented the
Yeah.
process. I don't know.
I would suggest waiting until you actually have a completed corrective process to be brought before the board.
Because they're still testing it.
So being that it says, may discuss and vote, so may vote, so we're just discussing.
At this juncture, I don't think there's any need for an actual vote. And then
Okay.
you could just, at an upcoming meeting, take a vote on any corrective actions that Miguel presents to you in final form.
Okay. All right. Well, at this time, we have no further business to cover. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and we are adjourned at 2:56 PM. Thanks, everyone.